17th Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the second book of Kings. A man came from Baal-Shalisha, bringing to Elisha, the man of God, 20 barley loaves made from the firstfruits, and fresh grain in the ear. Elisha said, "Give it to the people to eat." But his servant objected. "How can I set this before 100 people?" Elisha insisted, "Give it to the people to eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat, and there shall be some left over." And when they had eaten, there was some left over, as the Lord had said. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians. Brothers and sisters, I, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to live in a manner worthy of the call you have received, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another through love, striving to preserve the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace, one body and one Spirit, as you were also called to the one hope of your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him, because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
The 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The first reading comes from 2 Kings 4:42-44. It's a story of how Elijah is able to multiply some barley loaves in order to feed 100 people. They only received 20 barley loaves. Elisha, who is a bit of a miracle worker, a wonder worker, is able to bless it and produce enough food to feed everybody. And obviously this is a foreshadowing of what we hear in the Gospel, where Jesus multiplies the loaves and the fish. The second reading is from Ephesians 4:1-6. Paul, who identifies himself as a prisoner for the Lord. The premise of this letter is that Paul is writing it while he's in prison, and he begs the community to live with all gentleness, humility, patience, bearing with one another. They have to give Christian witness to the oneness of the faith. Because if they claim that they belong to Jesus, but they're divided, they're jealous of each other, then it disproves the message. It's as if either people are being hypocritical or they're being liars. They claim that Jesus and the Spirit are one, but they're not living as one. And therefore, we have to use the supernatural grace that God is offering us in order to make this true. And if there are divisions in the community, we should see those divisions as a scandal which must be healed. The Gospel is from John 6:1-15. Now this is John's version of the multiplication of loaves and fish. In Matthew and Mark there are 2 versions, one for 5,000 people who are Jewish, one for 4,000 people who are Gentiles. In Luke there's only one version, and in John there's only one version. The people are following Jesus, and he realizes that they're a large crowd, they don't have anything to eat. He asks Philip, where can we buy enough food for them? Now he does this as a test, and that's typical of the Gospel of John. Jesus always knows much more than the disciples, and he puts them to the test occasionally to allow them to grow in their faith. Philip's response, even if we had 200 denarii, it wouldn't be enough to give each one a mouthful of food. A denarius is a day's wage. Even if they had 200 days' wage, they couldn't feed these people. Now some exegetes will say this means that they had a purse that contained at least 200 denarii. Well, you can't really say that because this might just be an exaggerated statement. For example, I might say that you couldn't touch it with $1 million. That doesn't mean I have $1 million. It's simply a statement. They do bring forward a boy who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Now this is the only gospel that specifically mentions that they're barley loaves. Barley is the food of the poor. So if the boy is bringing Jesus 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, it's obvious this is all he has. This is similar to the widow's mite, those 2 copper coins, which was all she had. Notice there are 5 plus 2, 5 barley loaves, 2 fish, which makes 7. Even before Jesus multiplies it, it's already blessed. It's already complete. 7 is the perfect number. But Jesus then blesses it and gives thanks. Now in the other Gospels, they use a perfectly good Greek word for giving thanks, eudokeo. But in this Gospel, they want to emphasize the tie of this miracle with the Eucharist. So they use the word Eucharistein, because in fact, the word Eucharist means to give thanks. Jesus gives thanks, and he has the people recline in the green grass. The green grass is emphasized to remind us that Jesus is the fulfillment of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In verdant pastures he gives me repose. Jesus is our good shepherd. And just in case we miss it in this particular passage, Immediately following, Jesus walks on the sea. Beside restful waters he leads me. Each person has his fill, and then they gather up the fragments. Now even that phrase is very Eucharistic. In the first liturgical book of the Church, the Didache, the teaching of the 12 apostles, which was probably written between 70 and 130 A.D., the people are told to gather up the fragments after the celebration of the Eucharist. So when people would hear that phrase in this gospel account, it would immediately remind them of the Eucharist, much as the breaking of the bread reminds us of the Eucharist in the Emmaus account. They have 12 baskets left over, which is 12, enough to feed all the tribes of Israel. Jesus has truly nourished the deepest hunger of the people's heart, but they don't understand. They want to make him a king. They want somebody who will provide for all their immediate needs. Jesus has come to satisfy the deepest hunger of our hearts, which is to be loved. And in fact, this symbol, this feeding us with bread and fish, is a symbol of his caring for us, his being a shepherd, his loving us, even unto the cross. And may God bless us.